Alright, this is going to be my first video, and this is going to be on the Evans Gambit, which this is going to be the starting position that, so this is just an Italian, game, but once, B4 is played right here, that, classifies it as an Evans Gambit, and it is not the best move for white to be doing this, but a it allows for a lot of attacking chances for white. So if you want to get that kind of crazy attacking game, I would I would recommend this type of opening. I quite like it. Um so normally if they don't take, then in general you'll just be better because you were able to get their bishop off of this really nice square. And taking with the knight is very uncommon because you can just take their pawn with your knight. Um, but so normally people will take the pawn, and then you need to kick their bishop out by playing c3. And now, in general, there are a couple of ways black can go. Those are the normal person moves that most people will make in this situation. I am going to go over both. First, I'm going to go over bishop a5, in which case you play d4. Most people will take, in which case you just castle. So now there are normally two ways people go. They can either play knight g to e7 to try and castle quickly, or they can take another pawn, which looks very enticing. So let's go over that real quick. So if they try and take the c3 pawn, what you can do is you can immediately try to put pressure on this diagonal right here. And also, if they are planning on developing their bishop on c8, then this pawn is also very difficult for them to defend, and you are threatening to win this pawn back soon. So normally they will try and defend both, which makes enough sense. So now you can force them away from um this pawn right here. Um yeah, you can force them away from the c3 pawn with bishop g5, because all of the squares that the queen can go to the um that cover the pawn are also threatened by the knight. So obviously they are going to move the queen, in which case you can just take the pawn, and when they take and you take back, and now they normally try to develop here, but you can try and force them back, which is a very important idea. Is you sacrifice the pawn, you need to make sure that they don't get the development in these types of positions, which in a lot of these openings, if you don't take advantage of those couple of developing moves you got and the center space you have, you are just going to be down a pawn or two in the end game. So it's very important to try and force the knight back. When they attack all of your pieces with knight to e4, you can just move your queen to e3 to defend your bishop, and now, since they have the chance to get rid of the two bishops, which you got earlier, they can take, and you don't want to trade off. You don't want to take back with the queen, because trading queens would be not the best for you because of how much material you're down. So it's much better to instead just take with the knight so that they don't have a chance to queen trade. And then so now there are two possible moves, two moves that are common. So well, knight d8 is by far the best move. But so if someone plays this, you just need to try and take the center, just try to get and just get both of your rooks on these great files, try and win all their pawns because you're down the little bit of you're down the two pawns, but they have yet to castle, so you're still fine. But so in this type of situation, your plan is just to make sure that they don't have a way to develop this bishop or redevelop this knight. And if they can never develop those two pieces, yes, you're down two pawns, but it's very difficult for them to do much with it. So that's how I would play there. But instead, a lot of people will castle because, well, you this previous move, you attacked a pawn, so they want to defend it with a rook. And but this allows for you to bring your bishop back to d3, which skewers the queen and the pawn on h7. Now they have two choices, but they both are fairly similar. They can either go queen here or queen here. Every other square for the queen is actually covered, surprisingly enough. Playing f4 might look tempting until you realize that en passant can be played, and then all the pieces are being attacked again, except now there's so f4, so it can just be taken, and assuming you take back, now you're taking the pawn again. This time, actually, once you take the pawn with your knight, it comes with a fork, as well as the fact that eventually you can take advantage of this diagonal. But so yeah, so assuming they realize that and they play either queen h5 or queen h6. Um let's go with queen h5. You can just take because you need to get back on those pawns. Obviously, they should play king to h8 because taking with the queen means that they will lose said queen. And now, something very important is the fact that this bishop is actually going to be trapped next move if you don't get it out, so you should. C2 is the best square because it has choices of where it wants to go next. So, but all the other squares don't give it as many good options because the knight can harass it more easily. A lot of the time people will either play d6 or d5 in these types of positions to try and get this bishop developed. But if they play d6 or d5, you are just going to take on d6. In this situation, it would be en passant. And then, assuming they take back, they have an isolated pawn. And you are now just down that one pawn, and you can just try and put pressure on said pawn. So that's the variation of bishop a5. Let me make sure I bishop a5 and then taking. But a lot of people will play knight e7 here as well, because the idea is they want to try and get castled as quickly as possible, because the entire point of your opening is to try and pressure them and get advantage by not letting them get developed. So they're just developing pieces, they're not getting greedy for more pawns. So here you just play knight to g5 to try to put pressure on this square. Um, so, and so now they have like 3 moves. So let's go over the most fun variation first. So if they play castles, trying to defend that pawn with their rook, because that seems in general, if someone plays knight f5 and you can't take it, you should just, and you can castle, you should just try to castle. But in this case, it actually doesn't work because you have queen h5 and their knight isn't on f6. If their knight was on f6, obviously this would not be the best move. So now they only have one move to stop mate in 2. Well, only really one move to stop mate in 1. But they have a couple of moves that make it mate in 2 instead. But so they'll play h6. Try to make sure that you can't just checkmate them. And in that case, you'll just take on f7 with your knight. Taking with the knight is very important because the knight is the least important of these pieces, of these 3 attacking pieces of the bishop, knight, and queen. The knight is the least important, also the one being attacked. So they'll take, because if they don't, there's a lot of threats opening up. You can play bishop takes, in which case, so now there are 3 choices for them, and the one that looks the worst to me is actually the only one that doesn't quickly lose. So I thought king h8 and king f8 looked a bit safer than king h7, because king h7 you're just exposing yourself to this diagonal. But king h8 actually is the best move. King h7 is actually the best move. So we'll go over that last. So first, I think it is very important to know how to destroy opponents that make these common mistakes, especially in a blitz game. People are going to blitz out either king h8, normally king h8. But first let's go over king f8, because this one is fairly easy to just destroy quickly, because you just play bishop back, and now this square now is open for your queen instead of just your bishop, which would be checkmate. So now people might play queen e8 to try and trade the queens off. In that case, you can just play queen back to f3. They have 2 legal moves. One is to block with the queen, one is to block with the knight. Blocking with the queen blunders mate in 1. So they will block with the knight. You can just take that with your queen, with check. And now they'll play king e7 because if they play any other move, it's main one. Or yeah, they just had one other legal move, which was queen f7, which you can just take with checkmate. So now you should try to put pressure on these two pawns. So, and also it is pinning the pawn to the king, which means you can take this pawn if you really want to. So white is already completely winning, but let's go a few moves more to make sure. So king d8, you can take the pawn, and now you're just threatening everything. You're going to take this pawn and then check with the bishop, and there's nothing that black really can do about it. But if they play king f6 instead to try to defend the pawns, you can just take this pawn. You can take the h6 pawn with your bishop, and if they play queen to g6 to try to trade off queens, you can check with the bishop, and if they take, you can just start rushing them with pawns. And this is very clearly a very scary attack to deal with the black pieces. And as you can see, the computer is saying plus 14 because of just how crushing this this pawn is going to be. This pawn actually is going to queen next move, and there's nothing black can do about it. The only thing black could do about it is take it, such as if they just play c7, for instance, which is one of the best moves. No matter what they play, you're just going to queen next move, get another queen, and then immediately trade it for theirs. So that is why that variation doesn't work. So if they are to play king f8, which is the one that was the easiest, but if they play king h8, it's a bit more difficult to immediately see, but you can just take the pawn with your bishop. Bishop takes h6, and then if they take back, you take with checkmate, so they can't actually take back, which is very important. And you also are threatening checkmate in 1 already, so this is the best move is to block with the queen, which if your opponent's just sacrificing a queen like that, then you should be then you up a queen. Hopefully you can win. Hopefully they aren't really good at tricks, but a more reasonable looking move would be g6, in which case you can just take. People will normally take your bishop because trading off defensive pieces for offensive pieces is in general a good idea. In which case you don't even have to take back. You just immediately discovered attack their king with your queen. And you also are attacking their queen, which means that you are just going to take their queen most likely. But the funniest part is even after either of the moves, you don't take their queen immediately. of course it's fine to do so. If you just want to take the queen, it's fine to do so. But you should check them first. Um, and then whatever they do, you should just continue checking them for a couple more moves until you can win their knight, and then you can take their queen. Such as in this variation, you just take the queen. So I would recommend winning the knight before you take the queen, but obviously it's fine to just take the queen immediately. But okay, so that was the that was the castles variation, which I think will be, if your opponent does not know the opening, I feel is probably what they're going to play most often. So, and now the knight e5 variation is a very scary variation because it's not only defending against your threat, but it's also attacking your bishop, which obviously doesn't look fun. So I just recommend taking immediately with the knight. If they try any fancy shenanigans with taking your bishop instead, you just take their queen. So they should just take your knight, and then you take back. And then after king takes, you actually have this very nice check that actually goes all the way across. It's a very nice double attack. It hits the king and it hits the bishop. And so it's a very nice double attack because but so obviously they'll play g6 and you need to take their bishop. Normally people here want to try and get as much center as they can because that's one of the things they gave up for the pawn. But now they're soon not going to have any pawns for it or anything. They don't really have much they don't have a whole ton now, so they need to try and fight back for the center. But your pieces are still much easier to develop than theirs, which and here I like developing the bishop here because of how nice this long diagonal looks. Their rook is there, and it means, and they don't really have a piece to stop this super well. To stop these pushes, like this is their only option to stop that. But so now they always have to be worrying about that. A lot of so this is just to try to actually get the knight to be able to go to this position, and it also offers a queen trade, but you're still down a little bit of material, and their king's in the open. You don't want to give up the king being in the open and just queen trade into an endgame. So when then they normally try to bring their queen over here, which is a double attack. It attacks both your bishop and your pawn, but you can just give up the pawn. So they have to defend the knight, otherwise you can just you're going to develop your knight next move, no matter what, and it's going to attack the e4 square, the e4 pawn, and you're just going to take it. So this also gets pieces ready to defend the pawn. Even if it's not doing so right now, your opponent could, for instance, bring their knight out, but instead they will often try to defend with the bishop so that they still can take, so that they still have the preparation to play knight d5 to pin a knight to a queen if you try and take right now. So instead, you should try and get your knight on this really nice square, and it's attacking everything from here. Now, often, now they should just take the pawn, because otherwise you're gonna get a knight on e5, which I would say is better than their rook. But so that's what they normally do, and they give up the exchange, which you can wait. As you can see, you can wait a move to take it by attacking their queen, which is, and the reason they can't just take your bishop, well, often they do, but you can knight check and get your knight out by taking the e4 pawn, and then you have a lot of compensation. You're up in exchange in for 2 pawns, and your rook is about to be a menace. You can just bring it onto the 7th rank immediately, which is better than this rook is ever going to be. And then soon your queen can also get around there. So that queen is going, the rook and queen are going to be a lot better than their rook and knight or rook and bishop. So so that variation is very, so, and now I believe this is the main line, is to play d5. And if they play d5, I still like to take. The computer doesn't like it all that much, but I really like these types of variations where you now are threatening these types of moves, which are very difficult for your opponent to stop. So they often will. There are still ways to stop it, as you can see with them playing knight to e5. It means that you have to move your bishop back. Otherwise, if you were to try to just immediately play this, then they would just take your bishop. And since you're already down a piece, winning this piece, and then you have very, very little for it. So you really need to play bishop b3 first. So if so now next move, against most moves you can just play d6 and then immediately take the knight. But if your opponent tries to defend it by bringing their queen to stop it, what you can do is you can force their queen off the square by playing bishop to a3. And then after bishop to a3, they are forced to bring their queen over here, which now they are actually going to have some threats, which obviously I would prefer they didn't, but you can immediately play d6. Now, if they play king f8, they just lose because you take with check. So their only real choice is king e8. If they play king to f6, then that is pretty much a death wish because you're threatening all of you're able to force all of their pieces out. It, you're able to force their king out further because then their king has no way to retreat. After you still would take the knight though. So king e8, then you take, and now most of the time your opponent will see this threat, and obviously this seems like a very difficult move to match, but you can play bishop d5. In any variations like this, if you don't have bishop d5, you should not go into it. Um, but most of the time they will try and force you off that square, in which case you only have one square left to go to. So you need to go to f3. It's fine that you're trading off your bishop for your opponent's knight. Um, if they, assuming, so if they take, you just take back and their attack is gone, and you have a lot of threats. So a lot of the time they will try to bring their queen over here to f5 to the idea being that now assuming takes, 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 and first of all they mess up your pawn structure. Second of all, they get to take a rook. So in cases like that, this pawn is not going to be worth enough. Even though it's a pawn that's this far forward, it's not as good as the extra exchange they have and your crippled pawn structure. So instead, you should get your bishop out of that situation so they can no longer take. So you check them to make sure that you can play f4. And one important thing is if we were to, let's say the bishop is back here on f3. Now, if they were to try the same trick, first of all, their queen couldn't take, and you have an extra defender in the rook now, and you're kicking their knight out. So they could take, but if they take, it's with their queen especially, then you're going to take back with your queen. They are going to, so let's go over this. So let's say they take back with the queen. So then you take back. Let's say they take, obviously. And now you take, and now it's just saying it. They should. The computer says that they should just get their bishop out of there. But I think that this pawn right here, is more than is worth more than their anything that they have, and you're going to take this pawn soon. Um, so this is a variation they can go into, and it actually might tempt a lot of people, but both players have destroyed pawn structures, but yours is but you have a destroyed but your pawn structure doesn't weaken your king. Your king actually, surprisingly enough, still has a safe place. He still is safe here. But if but like you'll you'll notice that these three squares are not safe. They are not they don't have your opponent's pawns or anything. They are not safe. So I think that that's a lot better for you as long as you can try to show that it's that is a very difficult position to play, but I I find it to be quite the good position still. So a lot of the time, instead, they will try to develop their get their knight out of danger. In which case, you should get your bishop out of danger. Um, I would like to point out that I have it as the guy takes your bishop here, but if they want to get really greedy and take this pawn, which is not a good move, you can immediately play bishop takes pawn, bishop takes c6, and you win their queen. So that's a nice little trick to know in case your opponents get greedy. But and there's a chance people will do that in bullet games, but I would not expect good players to be doing that in slower chess. So instead, most people will take your bishop because that's your only piece defending this square, defending the e7 square. So now your pawn is going to be under attack. So now you can just take, and if they try to take here, you just play rook b1 and try to force some weaknesses over here and try and take all of their pawns because they can't push the pawns otherwise. So yeah, they cannot push pawns because then you can take with check and a double attack. So instead, normally people will play queen c5 to try to just threaten your knight. You should take their bishop, and they'll take your knight. And now you should take pawns in the center, and this these are really good pawns in the center, and I would not feel safe with black in positions like these because of the fact that there are these open files to your king, and the king's just going to be harassed the entire game, whereas even though my king doesn't have a pawn in front of it, he still is much safer because I have your pawn. So it's blocking the file. So so and I already went over that. Yeah, so let me make sure I went over everything I wanted to go over. Yeah, I believe I did. Yeah, so that's all I have on this opening today. Um, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions about the opening or any ideas on what I should do next, I have plans, but I'm open to other options. So if you have any ideas for future openings that I should go over, let me know. And if you have any um yeah, so please like and subscribe, and if you have questions on the opening, please leave them in the comments so that either I or someone else who knows the ideas of the opening could tell you them in the comments. That's it. All right. Bye.